Before I start talking about what your reference page should look like, I do want to be sure that everybody understands that what is on your references page must be cited in your speech and vice versa. A citation doesn't count if it's not on your works cited or reference page, and if it's on your reference page, it has to be cited in your speech. Otherwise, you're going to lose points. First of all, reference pages look a certain way. They look as this one does. There's not a lot of variety, not a lot of fun in the wonderful world of reference pages. At the top and centered is the word references, not works cited, not bibliography, references. A reference page is double-spaced. If I were to highlight this entire section and single-space it, everything would squish together with no lines, nothing between them. Everything would just smush together, including the reference section, and look like that. There's no extra spaces between anything. Everything just sits on top of each other until you tell it to double space, and then it spreads out and it looks all nice and pretty. Again, that includes the references title. When you are formatting, there's a little thing called a hanging indent. These guys are all the way over to this margin. Second and subsequent lines are indented half an inch, or they are tabbed over once. Some folks might struggle with this, might not know how to get a second line to show up like that. I did it the honest way. What you do, you come up here to the top and you grab that little...
Mr. Finley, you have a phone call in the office. Mr. Finley, you have a phone call in the office.
You grab the little triangle down here at the bottom and you drag it in, and it will drag in everything else. And tab it in. You gotta be sure you grab that little triangle though. If you grab this little L guy, nothing moves. Gotta grab the little triangle, and you can drag that line wherever you need it to go. If you don't want to do it the honest way, what you can do is, see, if you hit tab, it moves the whole darn thing. And we don't want that. That's not proper format. So if you want to do it the cheater way, come up to the first one, like I just did, hit enter, and then you can tab it over. And everything's fine. I don't know if you use the cheater way. I don't know if you use the honest, I'm an expert at Microsoft Word way. I just know that your line is where it needs to be. So you can either use the hanging indent up here on the measurement bar, or you can create a fake tab down here. But I like real tabs, so I'm going to fix mine really quick. You don't need to do any sort of numbering or bulleting on this thing. Notice there's no number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. There's no bullet, 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 because it's unnecessary. This hanging indent serves as its own bullet so that people can see where your sources end and where a new source begins. So there's no need to bullet anything on here. It's basically already done. Notice please that there is no changes in font except for italics where necessary, and that's something we'll talk about when we get to the APA presentation that's coming up shortly. But there's no bold and there's no underline anywhere in this reference page. Everything is just a nice plain 12-point Times New Roman font. Be sure that you alphabetize your references by the first word, which is usually a name, but the first word in your source. IKMR. If you look at these sources, if you look at King, Doob, and Tynan, you may make the observation that King, Doob, and Tynan are not alphabetized, but that's the way that they were listed on the original source, and you are not to change that. Don't alphabetize because you think those guys forgot. Leave it as listed because those people listed those names in the order that they did, probably because they had a long talk about who did the most work. And finally, you do not use hyperlink formatting in your reference page, and that means when you have a blue underline. I don't know what the last thing you guys heard was, but I hope I was talking about not having underlined and blue hyperlinks in your reference page, because that's what I remember saying last. You need to remove hyperlinks, which can be really easy. In a lot of word processors, all you have to do is hit right click and then come up to remove hyperlink. You hit remove hyperlink and it's gone. Some word processors don't make it that easy, and so what I advise you to do then is to highlight it all, come up to text color, make it black, and then take away the underline. And boom. It's still a hyperlink. You can still click on it, but it doesn't look like a hyperlink, and that's what's important. So that's what a reference page should look like. So next I want to highlight some things that occur in your APA citation guide so that you can make citation and reference page entries that are correctly formatted and contain the correct information. So break out your APA citation guide, and the first thing you want to do is you'll want to flip to the rules related to numbers of authors and types of authors. And I just want to highlight a few things. When you are listing a single author, as you can see in the first example in your packet, it's just last name, comma, first initial, and second initial if it's there. If there is a second initial given, technically you have to include it. But if there is no second initial, you do not have to email or call the guy and find out what his middle name is. You can just leave it at that. If you have two authors, then it's the last name of the first guy, comma, the first initial, followed by a period, comma, and then this little guy is what we call an ampersand. It's the and sign. It's Shift 7 on your keyboard. It usually looks like one of these. I know you music guys probably have a name for it, but I don't know. But it's the ampersand that combines them. Don't use the word and. Actually use this little symbol. That's if you have two authors. If you have 3 to 7, and yes, articles like that do exist, you list them all with an ampersand before the last author. You got 1, 2, 3, and then ampersand, and then your fourth author. If you have more than 7 authors, you will list the first 6, then you will use ellipses, and then you will list the very last. If you had 25 authors for an article, you would list the first 6, you would put ellipses, and then you would list number 25, and nobody else in between gets any credit. If there is no author for a source, do not put the date as the first thing in an entry. Flip the date and the title so that the title comes first. You can see an example of that. This is the first example on that reference page example that you have. where it says International Aid a Solution. That's not the author, that's the title of the article, and it has been flipped because there is no specific author who takes credit for that article. It's an organization that doesn't assign itself as the author, so it's just the title that gets put first. If you do have an organization that lists itself as an author, no, then it's the author. If it comes from the American Red Cross, it's published by the American Red Cross. If it's published by AARP, it's published by the AARP, and they are your author. You flip in your packet those author rules apply to every source, no matter the format. Whether it's a book, a periodical, or a website, those author rules apply across the board. If you have a book, go to the books section. I'm just going to highlight one, and it would be the basic format for books. The basic format for books has that information about author's last name, followed by the initials, the year that the book was published. You put the title in italics. You include the publishing city and the publisher. So some things to highlight on here have to do with capitalization. If you notice, for instance, in this example, this T is capitalized, but that's not, that's not, that's not, and that's not. Those aren't capitalized because the only things that are capitalized in APA titles is the first letter after a colon, and anything that's always capitalized, like in this case an acronym, or in this case a proper noun. And other freak rules like the word I would be capitalized all the time. So in the example below, courtesy of one S. Woods, I is capitalized because it's the first word, L is capitalized because it's the first word after the colon, and C is capitalized because Centralia is a proper noun. Then you have the publishing city, and no matter what, always include the state or the country that the city can be found in. It used to be that there were known cities that you did not have to include, like New York was known as a well-known publishing city, so you did not have to include the fact that it was in New York, but you do now. Same thing goes for things like Los Angeles and even places like Paris, because some kid in Djibouti might not know where Los Angeles is. So nowadays we have to include the state along with the city. And then you include your publishing company. Now the thing to know here, I'm going to establish it with the very first format, the basic book, is that punctuation is important. All your periods, all of your commas, and all your colons actually matter, and if you don't use them correctly, you will lose points. Next thing to highlight is on the next page, articles and periodicals. Periodicals is just a fancy word that refers to things that come out on a regular basis, like journals, magazines, and newspapers. The thing to mainly highlight here is the basic form. And the basic form is similar again in author format and year. If there is a month or a date given, especially for newspapers and things like that, just ignore it. Don't use those things. They're not necessary. Year is all that matters. Give the title of the article, following all those capitalization rules. And then this is where things get complicated. Then there's going to be a title of the periodical. So if it came from the Centralia Fireside Guard, there was an article from the Centralia Fireside Guard would be italicized. If it came from the Journal of Zoology, it would be italicized. The specific article from that journal would not be. But the journal from which the article came, that would be italicized. Also notice, in this example, all significant words, so everything but of, is capitalized. Journals have different capitalization rules than article titles do. So, in this one, only the first word is capitalized. In the journal title, all significant words are capitalized. Include the volume number and include the issue number. Volume number is italicized, issue number is not, and it's in parentheses. Follow that with a comma and the page numbers where you can find the article if you had the journal in front of you. Oddly enough, you do not need to include PP or P unless you're talking about a newspaper. And so, like I always like to say, only PP in a newspaper. Only PP in newspapers. Not on magazines. Magazines are too expensive. You might be wondering where you find that information. How do I know what the journal is? How do I know what the journal volume is? How do I know what the page numbers are? And it can be really easy to find. We're just going to do our standard giraffe search in EBSCOhost, so you can see EBSCOhost has all of these periodicals. And the thing I really want to highlight is that if it comes from EBSCOhost, it's cited like a periodical. Even though you don't have the actual newspaper in front of you or the actual magazine in front of you, you treat it like you do. So, on this page, this is an EBSCOhost source. This is the title of the article. So this would not be italicized in your works cited entry or your reference entry. And you would be sure that you lowercase the specific words for your title. You have your author. That's easy enough. It's right next to author. The journal or magazine or newspaper will be found next to source. And so in this case, Scientific American is the source of this article. That would be italicized and capitalized in your reference entry. The date follows, then the volume number, and then your issue number. And then after that, the page number. And in this case, all you'd have to put is 90. You wouldn't have to put 90 through 90. Everything you need to APA cite a periodical in EBSCOhost is right in this area. None of this is important. You need your title, you need your author, you need your periodical, the date, the volume, the issue, and the page number. Everything else is fine. You don't need ISSNs or accession numbers. You don't need to know what specific database it came from. last basic one I want to talk to you guys about, the last one that you'll want to star in your APA packet, is the generic website. So if you're looking at the articles and periodicals page, you flip to electronic sources, flip again, and find non-periodical web document, web page, or report. That's your basic website format. And that's where you end up here. Same deal. If there is an author, you include it. Last name, comma, first initial. Year, do your best to find a year. If there's no year attributed to your website, it's probably not a good website. ND is not really an appropriate thing to put in parentheses. No date does not instill a lot of confidence in your source. Title of the page. And then you have to include the words retrieved from. No colon, just retrieved from, and then your web address. The entire URL has to be included. And that's it. That's the wonderful world of APA citations, including musical interludes. And hopefully you caught the scolding at the end of that. But that is all you need to know for your basic understanding of APA. Most of you are going to use books, database sources, or internet sources. And so if you have other more specific ones that you want to use, then you can either look through the packet, or when I'm available, you can ask me.